The other thing that I wanted to make sure we talked about, because I think it's super interesting in an environment like where we're in today, and I know it's something you talk about a lot, is this idea of serendipity in your career, right? And I would imagine there's probably some in some of the stories you've already told today. And there's some, are all around us here today with the people we might meet, you and I meeting in the first place, definitely a serendipitous moment, right? And so tell me why this is something that you talk about a lot and take time out of your curriculum to make sure it's something that you're teaching your students about.
Absolutely. So this is a critical skill to learn. So being able to embrace serendipity. So serendipity, things happen all the time around you. Do you recognize that they're happening?
Sure.
And then do you stop and evaluate whether you should take advantage of it? Right? A lot of people don't. And really what this comes down to in terms of entrepreneurship and new ventures is the core of everything entrepreneurship is not only the mindset, but do you have an opportunity that's worth pursuing? So we call that entrepreneurship opportunity recognition. So entrepreneurial opportunity recognition. Do you have an opportunity that's worth pursuing? And you have to look at the desirability, right? Is there a market that really wants it? The feasibility, can we technically put it together? And then the viability, can we build a business around this that's eventually going to at least break even, if not, hopefully generate some profits? So this ability to recognize opportunities comes in many different forms. There's some people that purposely go out there and scan their industry, scan their environment, looking for gaps in the market, right? Is there a gap? I don't care what it is, but I just want to find where those holes in the market are. There's other people that are a little more whatever happens, happens. But I am a firm believer that serendipity plays a big role in all of these, right? Things are happening constantly. Are you actually noticing that they're happening? And I've got separate research on that with a whole model and everything on that. So I'll give you an example. So I am an accidental entrepreneur, right? So serendipity has played a huge role in my career, and it ends up in the strange spot I am, but I love how it all ended up. So I started out as a science geek. Didn't make enough money, accidentally ended up with a part-time job in business. Before long, that turned into a product management role in a computer company. And then all of a sudden, the computer industry started to go through some shakeups. So I ended up starting my own agency, marketing agency. But I wasn't intending to do that permanently. So I was out interviewing for jobs, right? I was in a turnaround that didn't turn around. And so I was interviewing for jobs and, I got some offers like, it's not quite as much as I want. And it turns out that a number of the companies I was interviewing at would love to have me work for them, but they couldn't afford me. I was like, well, how about if we do a few hours a week? So it's just kind of to fill in while I was interviewing. 2 years later, I turn around and go, I have to hire somebody. Holy cow, this is now a career.
Amazing.
So it's just, accidental things, opportunities to come up. So again, serendipity during those interviews, do you stop and think, well, maybe it's not going to be a full-time job. Look at it more creatively, with a wider view. Maybe it's something short-term, something number of hours, whatever. And then with my business, right, opportunities, I happened to run into a client. A client complained that Apple Computer was not helping them as much as they wanted. They were creating peripherals for Macs back in the day, and Apple wasn't helping them so much as they wanted. And I said, what if we create an organization that brings all sorts of developers together to then work with Apple? And now you've got a bigger impact because there's a lot of you versus Big Apple. And so it was all of a sudden this created a new opportunity, and that led to my publication and then the silly mouse pad business. And then at one point, not the best of times, but I ended up getting divorced. I was like, oh, this is sad. I want to do something new in my life. And it just so happened WPI had come to me and said, you need to teach here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? They didn't pay well enough. I'm like, no, schools don't pay well enough. I'm not going to do that. But they talked me into it because I want to do something different. So I went in as an adjunct. And then I was like, oh, I really like this. Right? I was told once long ago in a seminar series I was doing for small business owners, trying to find what you're really good at and what you love, what you're passionate about. One of the things that popped up on my list was public speaking. Like, what? I don't know. Turns out teaching is really kind of performance art. And you're doing all this speaking to the class, and it's a lot of fun. And then along the way, one of my colleagues turned to me and said, you really should get your PhD. And I'm like, are you crazy? Do you know how old I am? And it turns out it was a brilliant move. And I ended up with 2 full-time jobs, right?
It's an amazing story and an amazing path that you've taken. How do you teach people to lean into the right kind of serendipity? And I frame it that way because here's what I want to be cautious about what people might take away from the story you just told. Saying yes to everything might not be the best path, right? Looking for those moments, amazing, completely agree with you. But then I think you can take that too far, and all of a sudden you're spending time, and I ask this honestly as a selfish question for myself too, like there might be things that I say yes to that are not going to necessarily be revenue generating activities for me, right? And so how do you teach people to lean into serendipity, but be careful about the balance of how they spend their time? Because if you're just saying yes to everything and showing up to everything, you might not end up with a real direction at the end of that. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And it's interesting that you asked that because I never really thought of my story in this way. But if you look at how I transitioned, my transition into the computer industry was a part-time job. I could walk away from that at any time. My transition into education was an adjunct, right? I can walk away from that at any time. You're just teaching 1 or 2 courses, right? And so, the PhD was a whole different thing. That one, you're in or you're not, right? And there's a saying about when you get your PhD, if you don't cry when you're getting your PhD, you're doing it wrong. I can tell you that is absolutely the truth.
You did it right.
But it really is about taking a reasonable approach to how you do it. You want to embrace opportunities, but you also don't want to dive down into the rabbit hole, right? And you get lost and something like that. So I just happened to have embraced mine in ways that I could back out if they didn't work out. But once I found out they did work out, I dove in. And so here's one of the ways I have my students experiment with this is I challenge them in my design thinking class to do things differently, change your routine. We all get caught in these routines, habits, and also knowledge corridors. Here's what I've learned really well, and I'm going to stick to that because I'm good at that. But that then you now have a problem getting, how do I be more creative when I'm stuck in this one path? So I challenge my design thinking students to walk to class in a different path for the next couple of weeks and also do it differently. Right? Notice what's going on around you and, just kind of see what happens. So one of my students came in the next class and was so excited, right? He's like, you're not going to believe what happened. So I walked a different way to class. I took off my earbuds and I put my phone away and I just kind of wandered down the street. I literally ran into Jaylen Brown, literally ran into him, look up and I go, oh my God, that's Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown leans down, hey, how you doing? And the student was like flying high for the next week.
Amazing.
He's like, and I tell this story all the time because he still, as I saw him recently, he's like, I still can't believe that happened. And he said, if I had been on my phone with my buds in, it would have been one of those bumps that we do all the time. And you never would have stopped to look. So I challenge people to at least start by getting outside of your routine. Do things a little bit differently. Challenge yourself. Drive to work a different way, drive to the grocery store a different way. It doesn't take much to just start you on this different path and you start noticing things you didn't notice before.
For our non-Boston listeners, Jaylen Brown is the NBA champion from the Boston Celtics and reigning NBA Finals MVP, which if you're in college and you bump into on the streets of Boston is basically as good as it gets.
It is as good as it gets. You pass out at that point.